The venue sparkled with elegance. White roses cascaded from crystal vases, champagne flowed like water, and golden chandeliers cast a warm, glowing light across the ballroom. Laughter echoed against marble walls, and every detail had been curated to perfection. At the center of it all stood Selene, young, radiant, dressed in an exquisite designer gown that hugged her flawless figure. Her smile never wavered as she clutched the hand of her new husband, Dominic Harper, a well-known businessman with charm, wealth, and power. His eyes sparkled with pride, not just for the day, but for the woman beside him, the woman he now called his wife. In the far corner of the room, away from the dancing and toasting, sat Sarah Harper. Her presence went largely unnoticed. She wasn't in a glamorous dress or laughing with the guests. She sat in a wheelchair, draped in an understated navy gown, her posture composed and still. Her divorce from Dominic had been finalized just hours before the ceremony. Yet there she was, attending the very wedding that replaced her. Some guests whispered when they recognized her. Others turned away awkwardly, not sure how to react. What none of them could understand was why Sarah was smiling. It wasn't a bitter smile, nor was it one of defeat. It was a quiet, steady curve of the lips, subtle, yet deeply knowing. A smile not born of heartbreak or envy, but of understanding, because Sarah Harper knew something no one else in the room did. Not Selene, not Dominic, and certainly not the guests drunk on luxury and shallow celebration. She knew a truth that would soon unravel every carefully tied ribbon in that ballroom. And as the first notes of the couple's dance began, Sarah's smile deepened. In her mind, the real story was just beginning. 3 years earlier, that same smile had graced her face for a different reason. Back then, Sarah had stood at a podium inside a bustling bookstore reading the final pages of her best-selling thriller, Shadows of Deception. The audience was spellbound, hanging on her every word. In the front row, Dominic watched her with pride, applauding louder than anyone else when she finished. They were a power couple then, she a brilliant novelist, he a successful investment firm partner. Their home was filled with laughter, love, and plans for the future. No one would have imagined how drastically that picture would change. But life doesn't ask for permission before it shifts. It doesn't give warnings. It strikes in silence like the villains in Sarah's novels. And when it came for her, it arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The rain had fallen steadily all morning, a soft drizzle that blurred the cityscape into a watercolor of gray and silver. Sarah was on her way home from a meeting with her publisher, her car filled with annotated manuscripts and notes for her next novel. She had just sealed a major contract, her biggest one yet, and her thoughts were racing ahead to plot twists and character arcs. The windshield wipers ticked rhythmically, a metronome to her imagination. She never saw the headlights coming. Later, Sarah would only remember pieces, the blinding glare of the oncoming SUV, the screech of tires on wet pavement, the thunderous crash of metal colliding, and then silence. A stillness so absolute it felt like falling into a void. When she woke up in the hospital 3 days later, the world was smaller, reduced to white ceilings, beeping monitors, and pain that crept into every corner of her body. Dominic was there, his face pale with worry, his hands gripping hers tightly. "Sarah, thank God," he whispered, voice trembling. "You're awake." The diagnosis came quickly. Incomplete paraplegia. Her spine had suffered significant damage. She would likely never walk unassisted again. There was hope for partial mobility with intense therapy and time, but life as she knew it had changed forever. Dominic squeezed her hand, promising her the world. We'll get the best doctors, the best care, whatever it takes. I'm not going anywhere, he said. And for a while he kept that promise. He reorganized his work schedule to attend her therapy sessions. He sat through consultations with specialists and explored experimental treatments. He even slept in a rigid hospital chair for nights on end, refusing to leave her side. At home, he oversaw renovations, adding ramps, widening doorways, and moving her writing studio downstairs. Everything was designed for her comfort, her recovery, her new reality. But even the strongest vows can falter under the weight of relentless change. As weeks turned into months, something in Dominic began to fade. His eyes no longer lit up when he entered the room. His hugs were more routine than comforting. He started leaving the hospital earlier, arriving later. He took phone calls in hallways, murmuring in tones that were too soft, too secret. When Sarah asked about work, he would shrug. Just clients. Complicated cases. Nothing for you to worry about. By the time Sarah returned home, everything was functional, accessible as promised. But it all felt colder. Lifeless. A perfectly polished prison. Dominic hired a home health aide named Miriam, a gentle woman in her 50s with warm eyes and steady hands. Miriam helped Sarah bathe, dress, and perform exercises. She treated her with dignity, never pity. But even Miriam couldn't fill the space Dominic used to occupy. He's done so much for you, Miriam said one morning, adjusting the blanket on Sarah's lap. The house, the equipment, everything. Yes, Sarah replied, staring out the window. Everything except be here. The signs became impossible to ignore. A receipt from a 5-star restaurant dated on a night he claimed to be working late. A lipstick stain on his collar that didn't match any of Sarah's shades. And, most telling of all, the scent of a floral perfume she didn't wear, lingering on his clothes. Then there were the phone calls from his assistant, Selene. She always sounded sweet, polite, helpful. Mr. Harper left his phone in the office. He asked me to check in on you. Would you like me to drop off some files for him? Sarah had never met her in person, but the voice on the phone carried an edge. Too polished, too present. 6 months after the accident, while Dominic was in the shower, Sarah wheeled herself into his home office. She wasn't snooping. She only wanted a book. But when her chair bumped the desk, his phone lit up. The preview on the screen made her breath catch. Miss you already. Last night was perfect. Can't wait until she's gone. Sarah stared at the message. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply sat there, absorbing the truth that had always been circling her like a shadow. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. When Dominic emerged from the shower, his hair still damp, she was waiting. The phone sat in her lap. Who's she asked, voice low. His face shifted through shock, denial, and then something like relief. As if a weight had finally been lifted. I think you know, he said. Say it. Selene. My assistant. Sarah nodded, her face calm. It just happened, right? Dominic didn't answer. You made a choice, Dominic, she said. You didn't stumble into this. You walked into it. One step at a time. He tried to explain. He spoke of stress, of lost dreams, of how Selene made him feel alive again. And when Sarah asked how she made him feel, he whispered, guilty. 2 weeks later, he moved out. The divorce process began quickly. Dominic was eager. He didn't even fight the settlement. Her lawyer ensured she got the house and financial security. He wants to be generous, he said. No, Sarah corrected. He wants to be free, and he's willing to pay for it. Yet even as her life fractured, Sarah did not fall apart. The pain was real, yes, but so was a strange sense of detachment, like she was observing her own life through the eyes of a writer. And in that distance, a seed of something powerful began to grow. The divorce papers arrived on a calm spring morning. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Sarah's study, warming the room but not the air around her. Miriam wheeled her into position at the table, placing the envelope in front of her without a word. Sarah picked it up, her fingers trailing over the thick cream paper like it might burn her. Didn't. She signed each page without hesitation. Her signature curved cleanly at the bottom of the final page. An ending, yes, but not one that left her shattered. The ache was still there, a hollow place carved by loss and betrayal, but there was also a steady flame deep inside her. Quiet, focused, watchful. Later that day, Miriam brought another envelope. This one wasn't from the court or a lawyer. Its contents were more personal. An invitation. Sarah's hands paused as she opened it. Heavy cardstock. Embossed lettering. An elegant script announcing the union of Dominic Harper and Selene Montreux. The date? Just 1 week from today. Next Saturday, Sarah whispered. Miriam, reading over her shoulder, made a disgusted sound. The ink on your divorce papers hasn't even dried. Sarah exhaled slowly. This isn't a wedding invite. It's a declaration. Of what? That he's moved on. That his new life is perfect. That I'm nothing but a closed chapter. Are you okay? Miriam asked cautiously. Sarah traced the embossed names with her fingertips. Yes, she said. Then after a pause, I'm going. What? Miriam's voice was sharp with surprise. Why would you put yourself through that? Because, Sarah replied, her voice calm. A good writer always sees how the story ends. Miriam didn't argue. Not yet. But over the following days, she tried gently to change Sarah's mind. You don't need to prove anything. He's not worth it. You've already won in your own way. Sarah shook her head. It's not about winning. It's about seeing. Selene had only visited their home once, briefly, when she came to drop off some documents for Dominic. Sarah hadn't interacted with her directly, but Miriam had. And Miriam had noticed something. That week, as they were going through physical therapy exercises, Sarah saw a flicker of hesitation cross Miriam's face when Selene's name came up again. What is it? Sarah asked, instantly alert. There's something you're not saying. It's probably nothing, Miriam said, fidgeting with a towel. Miriam, you know I read people for a living. Tell me. Miriam hesitated, then finally sat down. When Selene came to the house, she looked familiar to me. At first, I couldn't place her. But then it hit me. Years ago, I worked in a private nursing home in Connecticut. There was a wealthy woman there, Eleanor Winthrop, widowed, no children. She had a companion named Caroline Miller. Looked just like Selene. Sarah felt a jolt run through her. Not just looked like her? No, Miriam said firmly. It was her. Same scar on the wrist. Same voice. Just a different name. Back then, Caroline was charming, too charming. Eleanor trusted her with everything. And just before she died, she changed her will. Left everything to Caroline. Within a month, Eleanor was gone. Supposedly natural causes. But some of us had doubts. What happened to Caroline? She vanished. Disappeared with over $2 million. Investigations started too late. No charges stuck. Sarah stared out the window, heart pounding. Her mind, ever the writer's mind, began drawing connections. Selene, Caroline, the pattern of entering the lives of vulnerable people, gaining control, vanishing with their wealth. She's done this before, Sarah murmured. And she'll do it again. Miriam added. Dominic is just the next target. Sarah turned back to her. Do you still have contacts at that nursing home? The administrator. A few nurses. I want you to reach out. Discreetly. I need to know everything about Caroline Miller. I want the truth. Miriam nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're going to stop her, aren't you? I'm going to write, Sarah said. That's what I do. I write the truth. Only this time, I'll wrap it in fiction so sharp it bleeds. And that's how it began. Not with vengeance, not with rage, but with the quiet fury of a woman who had been silenced, sidelined, and discarded, only to realize she still had the most powerful weapon of all, her voice. The wedding was everything Dominic had dreamed of, at least on the surface. It was held at an exclusive estate hotel, the kind reserved for royalty and old money. Elegant music echoed from a live quartet. Guests arrived in tailored suits and silk gowns, and the champagne never stopped flowing. No one could deny it was a fairy tale setting. And in that fairy tale stood Dominic and Selene, glowing, gorgeous, picture perfect. But Sarah Harper sat at the edge of that fantasy in a discreet corner of the reception hall, her wheelchair parked behind a tall arrangement of white roses. Her presence was a ripple of unease among those who recognized her. An ex-wife, divorced only 7 days ago, attending the wedding of the man who had discarded her for someone younger, more able, more alive. People whispered. They gawked. They glanced her way, then quickly looked away. But Sarah didn't care. She wasn't here for them. She wasn't even here for Dominic. Her eyes were fixed on the bride. Selene moved through the room with polished grace, greeting guests with practiced charm, laughing too easily, touching Dominic's arm just enough. But Sarah saw more. She saw the glances Selene gave to the servers, measuring, judging. She noticed how Selene steered Dominic toward conversations, how she surrounded him with her chosen circle of new friends and advisors. Not one person from his old life seemed to be here. He had been isolated, exactly as Caroline Miller Selene had done before. After the toasts, as the guests moved toward the ballroom for the first dance, Sarah quietly left. She had seen what she needed to see. The wedding was a performance, and Selene was playing the role she had perfected across years and aliases. Back home, Sarah wheeled into her study and opened her laptop. The outline was already there. The novel would be called Veiled Intentions. And it wouldn't just be a story, it would be a weapon, a revelation, a mirror. Fictional tale, yes. But one filled with razor-sharp truths only those closest to the real-life players would recognize. Miriam returned from her research with everything Sarah needed. The administrator from the Connecticut facility confirmed Caroline's manipulation of Eleanor Winthrop. Other employees recalled how Caroline had controlled every aspect of the elderly woman's life, her finances, her visitors, her medications. Sarah wrote down every detail, the perfume bottles, the fake background stories, the shifting identities, the disappearing acts. There were rumors of a similar con in Florida, a young woman named Christina Matthews who had charmed a wealthy widower, inherited millions, and disappeared days after his funeral. Different name. Same scar. Same pattern. It was her. Sarah's antagonist was beginning to take shape. She called her Valerie in the novel, a stunning, intelligent sociopath who preyed on vulnerable people. In the book, Valerie marries a recently divorced man whose wife had been paralyzed in a tragic accident. The story unfolds as Valerie isolates him, controls his finances, and prepares to vanish again. The resemblance was undeniable, and Sarah made sure the details were exact. Valerie twisted her hair when nervous, just like Selene. She hated seafood but claimed to have grown up near the coast. She had a collection of vintage perfume bottles. Her past was a patchwork of lies stitched together with elegance. Sarah's editor was stunned by the manuscript. "This is your best work yet," Elaine said during their call. "It's terrifying and brilliant." Sarah didn't smile. "I'm not writing for praise this time." "What are you writing for, then?" Sarah stared at her screen, the title Veiled Intentions glowing in bold letters. "For the truth," she said. The book was fast-tracked for publication. Advance copies were sent out. Critics raved about its realism. Book reviewers called Valerie one of the most convincing con artists ever written. And slowly, deliberately, Sarah began phase 2. Using anonymous accounts on forums and social media, she started discussions. Valerie's methods feel so real. Could this be based on a true story? Her scam in Connecticut is so specific. Was there a real case? The internet did what it does best. It connected dots. Readers began linking Valerie's traits to real-life cons. Some dug up the story of Eleanor Winthrop. Others remembered a Florida case involving a woman named Christina Matthews. And a few especially observant fans noted that Sarah Harper's ex-husband had recently remarried a woman named Selene right after Harper's tragic accident. Was it coincidence? Or something more? The fire was lit. Sarah sat back and watched the smoke rise. She had written the truth as fiction. And now the world was reading it, some with admiration, others with suspicion. And somewhere in the middle of it all was Selene. Still pretending to be perfect. Still hiding behind the veil. But Sarah knew that veil was thinning. It wouldn't be long before someone pulled it off completely. The novel, Veiled Intentions, exploded into the literary world like a grenade wrapped in silk. Sarah Harper's long-awaited return to fiction became an instant sensation. The haunting silhouette on the cover of a woman casting multiple, shifting shadows captured public imagination. The tagline whispered danger: she becomes whoever you need her to be until she takes everything. It climbed bestseller lists in mere days, earning critical acclaim not just for its chilling plot, but for the depth of its psychological realism. Reviewers praised Sarah's ability to humanize a monster, to paint Valerie not just as a predator, but as someone cunning, calculated, and disturbingly convincing. The internet buzzed. Social media lit up with readers debating Valerie's motives, dissecting her manipulations, and, most importantly, asking one question again and again. Is this character based on someone real? Sarah never confirmed it. She didn't need to. The hints were there for anyone paying attention. Valerie had a scar on her right wrist. So did Selene. Valerie had once worked in a nursing facility in Connecticut. So had the woman Miriam recognized. Valerie had posed as Christina in Florida, Caroline in Connecticut, and now someone else entirely. Selene Montreux. Theories spread like wildfire. Book clubs analyzed timelines. True crime podcasters picked up the scent. One podcast in particular, a popular weekly show that explored the intersection of literature and real-life mystery, dedicated a full episode to the possibility that Veiled Intentions wasn't just fiction, but an exposé in disguise. They didn't name Selene directly, but they didn't have to. The parallels were too precise, too deliberate. And within weeks of the book's release, Dominic Harper's name began appearing in the speculative threads. Someone dug up their marriage announcement. Someone else noted the timing of Sarah's accident and the suspicious speed of Dominic's remarriage. Another pointed out that Dominic's new wife bore a striking resemblance to the elusive Caroline Miller, last seen disappearing with a fortune from an elderly woman's estate. Sarah monitored all of it quietly, saying nothing, feeding nothing. She let the world do the math. And then came the phone call. "Miss Harper, said the voice on the line. "My name is Michael Donovan. I'm an investigative reporter with the Boston Globe. I believe you may be able to help me connect a few dots." She smiled faintly. "Would you like to come to my home, Mr. Donovan?" He arrived the next day, a soft-spoken man in his 40s with kind eyes and a journalist's leather notebook. He wasn't there to gossip. He had already uncovered more than Sarah expected. He had traced a pattern across 3 states, 3 names, 3 victims: Christina Matthews, Caroline Miller, and now possibly Selene Montreux. He had read Veiled Intentions cover to cover, highlighting every detail that aligned with real-life events. "I believe your novel is a roadmap," he said. "And I think you've written it to warn the world." Sarah didn't confirm. She simply asked, "What do you plan to do with what you found?" Donovan leaned forward. "Publish it. As an investigative piece. I just need one thing: confirmation that Selene Montreux is who I think she is." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then gave him a list of names, contacts Miriam had helped her gather. Former staff, concerned relatives, documents filed quietly, never pursued. "Use what you can verify," she told him. "Follow the money. Follow the patterns." And he did. For the next several weeks, Donovan worked tirelessly, assembling a timeline so detailed and damning that there could be no room for denial. With every new revelation, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. 3 months after the wedding, Donovan called again. "I have it all," he said. "Photographs, testimonies, financial trails, offshore accounts. She's used at least 4 identities. It's the same woman. There's no doubt now. And Dominic? He'll see it with the rest of the world when the article runs Sunday." Sarah sat in silence for a moment, then nodded. "Good." The article landed like a bomb. The woman with 3 names. How a serial con artist targeted the elderly and almost got away with it. It ran on the front page of the Boston Globe's investigative section. The story chronicled Selene's rise through false identities, her exploitation of vulnerable victims, her sudden disappearances just as legal lines closed in. It tied the cases together through scar evidence, identity documentation, voice analysis, and offshore financial records. Though Sarah's name was mentioned only in connection to her novel, the article made clear Veiled Intentions had exposed something real. Public reaction was swift and brutal. Selene vanished. She emptied the couple's joint bank account and left behind a hastily packed suitcase. Dominic was blindsided, humiliated. He released a statement through his attorney claiming to be a victim of calculated fraud. And Sarah? She stayed silent. She didn't gloat. She didn't post. She simply watched from her garden window as the truth she had planted bloomed into something undeniable. Her novel became more than a bestseller. It became a cultural phenomenon, a case study, a weapon disguised as art. One evening, her editor called. "The story's everywhere," Elaine said. "The article, the podcast, Twitter's going mad. They want to know. Did you write this knowing who she was?" Sarah paused. "All fiction is drawn from truth," she said. "Is that a yes?" "That's the only answer they'll get." And then quietly she opened her laptop. The final chapter wasn't finished. Not yet. The fallout came swiftly like a tidal wave triggered by a single crack in the foundation. Within 48 hours of the article's publication, authorities in both Connecticut and Florida reopened their investigations into the cases tied to Caroline Miller and Christina Matthews. Forensic accountants began tracking the offshore accounts that funded Selene's lifestyle. Elder advocacy groups applauded the exposé and shared Sarah's book as a case study. What had started as a novel had now become the nucleus of a criminal case. Selene, or whatever her real name was, disappeared. She left behind no forwarding address, no trace, just a trail of betrayal, financial fraud, and Dominic Harper's broken pride. She had withdrawn $50,000 in cash from their shared account the morning the article dropped. She left behind nothing except the dress she wore at their wedding, still hanging in their closet like a ghost. Dominic issued a short statement through his legal team. "I was deceived. I am cooperating fully with the authorities. I request privacy during this time." Privately, he began proceedings to annul the marriage on the grounds of fraud. But Dominic wasn't finished, not yet. A month later, Sarah received a letter. A lawsuit. Dominic Harper was suing her for defamation, claiming veiled intentions had deliberately and maliciously portrayed his wife, resulting in emotional distress, damage to his reputation, and financial loss. He demanded $10 million in damages. Sarah stared at the letter unsurprised. She called her editor, who immediately looped in the publishing house's legal team. By the following morning, she was speaking with Patricia Shao, a First Amendment attorney with a reputation for demolishing frivolous lawsuits. "Truth is your defense," Patricia said. "And thanks to Donovan's article, we have more truth than they ever expected." "But the novel is fiction," Sarah said carefully. "Fiction based on documented patterns, real-world behavior, and corroborated facts. That's not defamation. That's literature doing what literature does best, illuminating the hidden." Sarah nodded. "Then let's fight." The court case stirred another media frenzy. News outlets debated whether veiled intentions was an act of art or vengeance. Literary critics argued about the ethics of turning real-life experiences into fiction. Some praised Sarah for her courage and innovation. Others accused her of using the novel as a weapon to punish an ex-husband and destroy a rival. But Sarah remained calm. She gave no interviews. She issued one statement: "The book speaks for itself." When the preliminary hearing arrived, the courtroom buzzed with reporters and legal analysts. Cameras flashed as Sarah wheeled into the courthouse, dressed in navy blue, chin high. Dominic sat at the plaintiff's table, visibly aged, jaw tight, his legal team flanking him like bodyguards. The judge, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 60s, opened with a simple question. "Mr. Thornton, can you specify what, exactly, in Ms. Harper's novel is both false and defamatory?" Dominic's lawyer hesitated. The book contains specific details that mirror the plaintiff's life, including a disabled ex-wife and a new marriage to a woman whose past is clearly villainized. "But is it false?" the judge asked again. "Because if not, this is not a defamation case. This is an uncomfortable truth wrapped in fiction." Patricia stood. "Your Honor, we are prepared to present substantial evidence that supports the factual basis of the novel's events. From the identities used by Ms. Montreux to the financial patterns uncovered by investigative journalists." The judge leaned back. "I've read the book. I've read the article. This lawsuit appears to be less about falsehood and more about wounded pride." With that, the court denied Dominic's request for an injunction to halt publication or promotion of veiled intentions. It was a major win, and Dominic knew it. 3 weeks later, the lawsuit was quietly dropped. But the consequences for him had already taken root. His business suffered massive client losses. Former colleagues distanced themselves. He was no longer seen as the high-flying investor, but as the man who married a con artist and tried to sue the woman who exposed her. For Sarah, life began to settle into something new. She renovated her home with the earnings from the book, adding an elevator, a more accessible bathroom, and a sunroom that doubled as a second writing space. She started a foundation to support spinal cord injury research and creative writing programs for disabled individuals. She spoke at literary conferences, her session often titled Truth in Fiction, when storytelling reveals reality. And then, one spring afternoon, Dominic called. "I'd like to see you," he said. Sarah hesitated, then agreed. He arrived the next day. Thinner, older, quieter. "I came to apologize," he said. "For everything. For leaving. For not listening. For suing you." Sarah nodded. "I accept the apology. But forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing." "I know," he said, sitting across from her. "I miss you. I miss the woman who saw the world so clearly." "No," Sarah said gently. "You miss the version of me who didn't yet know what you were capable of." He looked away. "You once told me I made you feel guilty," she added. "And now I think you finally understand why." He said nothing. At the door, as he left, he paused. "Your book, it really was brilliant. Even knowing it was partly about me, about us, I could see the craft. You're extraordinary." Sarah looked at him calmly. "Not always. I didn't see you clearly. Not until it was too late." That night, she returned to her writing desk. She had started a new novel, not about betrayal this time, but about rebuilding. About a woman who loses everything and discovers that the empty space left behind isn't a grave, but a foundation. Outside, spring had fully bloomed. Green shoots had pushed through the soil. Life, it seemed, had not ended. It had simply begun again.